Welcome to Business Talk, and we're time to talk now about environmental, social, and governance. One of the big themes that we certainly saw at the recent World Economic Forum, and I think despite the teething pains that some organizations are experiencing, adopting ESG principles is going to become your future operational standard. It's not a question of if, but a question of when, certainly. And over the last decade, ESG strategies have been gaining ground, increasing by 20% since 2011. But it has been difficult to accurately monitor and measure ESG. Well, I'm joined now by Joel Buatre, who is a digital portfolio lead at corporate and investment banking at Standard Bank Group, to talk a little bit more about how the bank is thinking about this. Welcome to the show, Joel. Now, adoption of ESG principles has grown substantially around the world, but South Africa is still lagging behind somewhat. Why do you think this is the case?
There are a number of issues which are impacting us on this, Michael. Firstly, we have an issue around the various metrics and reporting frameworks that we have globally and the lack of consistency in them. So companies are struggling to see how do they apply themselves to these, and how do they compare apples with apples across all these frameworks? We also see issues then coming off that around inconsistent ratings. So the one rating agency will give you a rating out of 100, with anything closer to 100 being good, whilst the next one will also do the same out of 100, with something closer to 0 or 1 being good. So that inconsistency has also got a lot of corporates uncomfortable with the adoption. And then adding on to that, there's this issue around compliance versus opportunity-driven adoption. So if you need funding or if you need to impress investors, that's an opportunity-driven need, which then causes you to go after complying with these ESG requirements. It's not a mandatory requirement from either the policymakers or any boards that the corporates are affiliated with. So we find that this issue around compliance, this is opportunity-driven needs, creates a bit of a slowness in how that adoption kicks in. And then lastly, it's this thing around data. So there are large data challenges around how do you measure the different metrics around the 3 pillars of ESG, being environmental, social, and governance. And if it's tough for companies to measure this, and it's tough for companies to then share the information around this, it then leads further up the line into these inconsistent ratings that we're talking about, which then also leads further up the line into these multiple metrics and frameworks that we have. So you can see it's a circular economy, to make reference to something around sustainability, but the one leads to the other, which makes it quite tough for companies to buy into it.
Yeah, and that's why, with the development of ESG around the world, increasingly we're seeing some more standardization. The taxonomy is becoming refined, and so hopefully we'll overcome many of these challenges. But I think the measurement one is an important one, because if you think about the E, probably easier to measure things like carbon emissions, your water footprint. When you think about social, a lot tougher. What kind of impact are you as a property firm having in your local community? And to then report back on that. I mean, you can understand how much of a challenge that is. But it is important. And why do you think it's critically important that African businesses take ESG strategy seriously?
From an Africa or a developing economies perspective, we find that we have to look at a balance between long-term sustainability objectives and temper these with shorter-term needs to address socioeconomic and economic growth challenges. So driven with that in mind, it's very tough for African businesses, or indeed African governments, to push agendas which are linked to environmental pillars of ESG, and looking at how do we start generating energy away from the more carbon intensive or coal-based energy drivers, and start focusing on renewable energies, which has an impact on what you're going to focus on investing. Because for a lot of African businesses, African companies, African governments, there's a huge need for them to drive socioeconomic upliftment within their own economies or communities. And that takes more of a preference to how we then balance it out with the environmental lens of ESG. Further to that, we see a lot of governments fighting corruption. We see a lot of governments needing to do more to promote diversity and gender equality within the workspace. So we've seen that the E element of the ESG has taken a bit of a backseat, but we need to start providing solutions and tools which emphasizes more on the S and more of the G. Having said that, for us to be competitive in this global economy that we find ourselves in, we need to adhere to these ESG principles. African companies are more and more entrenched into global capital markets. African companies are more and more entrenched into global value chains. And for them to become attractive from an investment perspective or competitive from a business perspective, they need to do more to showcase how they are indeed meeting or complying with these ESG principles.
Yeah, and to build on that, you could potentially, if you're an exporter, be closing yourself off to market opportunities. If you think about what's happening in Europe, they've got the carbon border adjustment mechanism, the CBAM. So they're going to be putting taxes, tariffs, call it what you will, on products with, high degrees of carbon intensity. And so you could be cutting yourself off from an opportunity. What do you see as the major challenges that South African businesses face when trying to realize these ESG ambitions?
There are challenges that they face externally. So as a grouping, we face issues around greenwashing, which is more around how a company is preventing themselves from providing misleading or false information around the environmental impact of their products or operations. So greenwashing is a big issue that they need to address. There's also a lack of policy and pressure. So why would you want to invest in pushing ESG practices within your own business if you do not fully buy into it making you more competitive as compared to your other peers, when you don't see your other peers doing the same? So there's a lot of investment that goes into making yourself more ESG compliant per se. So this lack of policy and lack of pressure does not force everyone to compete at the same level. So that then hinders this investment into that. And also it creates uncertainty. I mentioned the data issue earlier. That is a big driver, because if you're not comparing apples with apples, and if you're not looking at more than just financial metrics in looking at the long-term value that companies are bringing, why would companies want to then apply these metrics in the running of their own businesses?
Now, I mean, within all of those challenges, there's always an opportunity, and really, dynamic, innovative businesses look at challenges and say, right, well, there's an opportunity for us then to help companies overcome these. And that's what Standard Bank is doing. And I know as part of your mandate, you led the development of a framework which the bank uses to evaluate potential sustainability and ESG benefits for all your products and solutions. So you saw an opportunity here to say, right, the market's struggling with a few issues, we can help. How so?
Thanks, Michael. In interactions with some of our clients, it was very evident that although they had a clear view as to what their ESG ambitions were and what they wanted to do along that, it was very difficult for them to articulate how they would go about realizing them. This was a gap in which we thought, as an organization that embraces platform business models, we see our role as being just more than a capital provider, particularly for ESG-related initiatives. And we wanted to create a marketplace through which we'd be able to link ESG producers. So these are vetted companies that are building solutions fitting within this ESG ambit, and ESG consumers, which are these businesses we're talking to who they have a view of what the ambitions are, but they can't really articulate how they're going to go about achieving this. So we wanted to bring these guys together into a marketplace. And for us, it was a unique opportunity to become a digital sustainability market leader by taking this first step in creating this marketplace. And it's very simple. It's based on, if you will, a sustainable or sustainability journey with setting the strategy at the starting point of this. So there are businesses out there who know where they want to go, but they don't know what paths to follow in getting to achieve this. So how do we help them think about their strategy? How do we help them to track and report on what their sustainability or ESG targets are? We then follow this by helping them understand what impact or what effect they have on this, not society alone, but the ecosystems that they're a part of. So we think about transparency and trust. How do we help you unpack the ESG risks that are inherent within your supply chains? And how do you help you measure and then further down the road mitigate the impact you're having in enhancing the companies or the smaller businesses that are part of your supply chain? With Eskom, and we also going to see a lot more around water management going forward. There's this idea about utilizing natural capital. So we've got a product called Power Pulse, which helps companies want to be self-reliant in the generation of energy, and they want to monitor and manage their own energy efficiencies to help them generate, utilizing renewable energy, their own energy. And we can see that going forward, this idea around natural capital and the circular economy is just going to grow more and more. Further to that, we've got products which we're trying to help our clients and our customers think about what their commitment is to net zero and how they go about managing that commitment. And then lastly, it's all well and good helping clients understand what this journey they need to go on looks like, but how are they going to fund it? So that is something we as an organization have been doing quite well for years. And we just thought it's a nice way for us to walk in this journey with our clients and show them that we do have the tools and solutions which will help you tackle this journey and set this strategy that you're on. And we also have the funding or the capital instruments that can help you fund this transition, if you will.
It's a very shared value approach using kind of platform thinking, because you're saying, well, as a bank, there's pressure on us to increase our lending into the ESG environment as well. And we realize that our clients are wanting to do this and we can help fund them, but they don't know where to start. So let's play that catalytic role through this ESG marketplace, which is fantastic. Yeah, can you just explain a little bit more? I think that Power Pulse idea is very interesting given what we see with Eskom at the moment. And we in Cape Town recently had the announcement that feed-in tariffs are now going to become a thing. So we're heading towards this more decentralized energy procurement model. How exactly does Power Pulse help companies decentralize their energy production and consumption?
Thanks, Michael. PowerPulse is a solution that we've created that falls within this ambit around decentralized energy. And it's exactly that. It's a way for us to link our clients who want to manage and control the generation of their own energy with EPCs, who then do an assessment on what their needs or requirements are. They then generate proposals on this digital platform. And our clients are then able to go and look at the various proposals and choose which one works best for them. At the back of all these, we also link them into the rest of our organization. We can then help these clients fund themselves. There's a lot of opportunity in this space for us to help our clients become a lot more reliant on their own energy generation. And as we've been seeing recently, there's a lot of challenges that not just big corporates, but also smaller businesses now facing in terms of running themselves sustainably and looking at their long-term survival of their own businesses because they're struggling with energy. And this is such a key opportunity for us to help support them on their journeys as well.
I think this is one of the most exciting solutions that I've seen so far in the energy space. So I think it's going to see it thrive and be very oversubscribed in the bank over the next few months and years. And then you also mentioned on the governance side, you've got something called WhyStock. How does that help businesses improve their ESG posture?
WhyStock is also a very interesting solution for us, and it helps us focus more on the governance side, as you mentioned, but also on the social side. So what we've seen a lot with ESG is most companies will offer solutions that look at environmental, but with WhyStock, we've got something very nice that helps with the S and the G. And in that, we find that most big corporates have well thought out enterprise level digital tools that are used to engage, communicate, and manage their office-based workforce. The oldest of this is email. So we're all very comfortable and familiar with email. And with the onset of COVID, we've seen proliferation of the uses of Teams, Zoom, intranets, etc. These office-based workers are easily engaged through digital means and are very connected to the businesses that they work for. However, when we start looking at the front line, or what we call blue collar workers, the opposite is true for them. Workers in these spaces are usually not being engaged or communicated to by general management. Half of them don't know who their CEOs are. Half of them don't know what's happening in the organization and what impact that has on them. And so we find that things like email addresses and what we take for granted as office-based workers are meaningless to them. WhyStock has solved this problem of helping us communicate directly with our frontline workers by creating a digitally enabled employee engagement solution, which is aimed at the frontline worker, and through which these employees can access the solution either via an app if they have devices that the smart devices that allow them to do that, or through USSD, and it can be accessed anywhere and at any time, and hence they become more engaged and included as their office-based colleagues. WhyStock also makes the lives of these employees much easier when we start thinking about things like their digital access to payslips, where historically, and if you think about mines, where they need to go to the mine office to get their pay slips or to get their leave balances. Now what we're seeing is that through WhyStock, they can look at this digitally, and also then saves them time in having to, walk distances they used to do historically. So an engaged and included employee, as a result of this, is a safer, more motivated, empowered, and a happy employee. And for us, it helps us solve for the S in the ESG journey of our clients.
Joel, I mean, it's absolutely fascinating how you connected all of these different facets of environmental social governance to the imperative for businesses to grow, to navigate this very complex and for many very daunting landscape using platform thinking. So if I want to get hold of you, do I just hit you up online? How do I get hold of Standard Bank if I'm interested to become part of this ESG marketplace, or to find out a little bit more about how the bank can help me as a company on my ESG journey?
There are various ways you can get hold of us. One of the main ones would be to just Google OneHub Standard Bank, and through that, you'll be able to get access to these various solutions that I've mentioned. Right. Alternatively, you could just email me or the OneHub support team, and they'll be able to link you directly to any of the information that you need to take your ESG journey forward.
Well, that's it. OneHub, Standard Bank. Google it if you're interested in learning more about how you can accelerate your ESG journey. Thank you very much, Joel Buatre, Digital Portfolio Lead for Corporate and Investment Banking at Standard Bank Group, sharing a little bit more about how the bank is helping companies to understand and manage their ESG journeys here on Business Talk.